I recall a conversation I had with my older sister about 3 years ago as I got ready to begin my college career. We were on FaceTime, and I was watching her eat a bowl of soup as she relayed the events of her week to me. We were having a heart-to-heart, and I remember telling her to have an attitude of gratitude. At the time, she told me I was very unhelpful and cliché. Her exact words were, "Broski, that's not helpful at all." Since then, every time either one of us had a bad day, my go-to phrase was, "Have an attitude of gratitude." She still laughs it off to this day, but it became a life motto for me and a special memory for us. I tell you this story because it made me think about how often we tend to find fault in our everyday life. Whether it be overthinking the way we acted in a certain situation, ruminating about how a person treated us, or simply feeling anxious and overwhelmed about our daily responsibilities. In today's society, the perpetuation of a negative mentality has become increasingly normalized. This concept has further advanced the stigma surrounding mental health and well-being, while bringing to light the prevalence of the lack of preventative medicine in our world. Today's grind culture, socioeconomic values, and gender roles further contribute to these misconceptions among today's youth specifically. We are a very career-driven society and expect individuals to have a clear-cut path in life so early on. The expectation to dedicate oneself to a purpose has become a source of stress for people's livelihoods. When we think of the roles of men and women and how mental health comes into play specifically, there are certain notions we have come to normalize in a sociological perspective. Men and women differ in the extent to which they can freely express their emotions by societal standards. Often, men are belittled or put down for struggling with their mental health, while women are often labeled as too emotional. These gender norms make it significantly harder for adolescents to cope or articulate their emotions in healthy ways as young adults. In the face of these stressors, I want to talk about how gratitude can advance the field of positive psychology and benefit quality of life overall. The concept of gratitude can be rather difficult to quantify, but many practices are now being used as ways to improve quality of life. These include meditation, writing journal reflections, and developing a growth mindset. However, it's important to keep in mind that these practices often come with time and are a reflection of how much effort an individual puts in themselves, which can look different for everyone. Physical manifestations of gratitude, like writing letters, journaling, and giving back to the community in some sort of way, can be very helpful for many. Non-tangible methods like reflections, meditations, and affirmations can work for others. Most importantly, not all of these practices may seem enjoyable to you, but it's most important that we recognize that being able to understand the positive aspects of our experiences and being open to making an effort to seek them out on a daily basis is what helps us regulate our emotions overall. These activities are helpful, but a change in mindset is ultimately what it means to practice gratitude. So what is gratitude? Textbook definition, it's a strong feeling of appreciation for someone or something. When we think about this concept, we tend to associate it with only positive emotions and positive feelings. But I believe the true value of gratitude comes in the face of adversity. It's easy to be grateful when life has no stressors. But how can we have an appreciation for life when it isn't all sunshine and rainbows? Now, what happens biologically in the brain on an anatomical level when we engage in these practices of gratitude? Research in the field of positive psychology discusses the cellular impact of gratitude practices in the brain. Findings have shown significant changes in neurological structure and positive health outcomes. The brain is complex, but just like a muscle, the more we use it, the stronger it becomes. Neurons in the brain communicate through the release of chemicals called neurotransmitters. Neuroplasticity in the brain is the process in which new connections and new points of communication can be formed through structures called synapses. The more a certain area in the brain is used, the stronger these connections become. This is essentially the process that allows gratitude to be honed, almost like a skill. Specifically, practicing gratitude has led to stronger synaptic connections and strengthened synaptic formations within the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is largely responsible for decision-making, cognitive and self-reflection and cognitive information. The limbic system is a group of brain structures largely responsible for emotional response and memory formation. This is often referred to as the emotional brain. The cortex pairs with the limbic system, as well as the posterior hippocampus, to influence emotional regulation and judgment. Long-term potentiation in the brain, also known as LTP, is a process in which memories are consolidated and synaptic formation aids in the reinforcement or learning of these thoughts and behavior. The repetition of these gratitude practices in the brain leads to a feedback loop of a behavior, so the more we practice these behaviors, the more easier it is to approach difficult situations that might emotionally or mentally derail us. This aspect of learning ultimately changes how often or how deep we experience these negatively valent emotions. In accordance with the limbic system, the mesolimbic pathway of the brain is part of a larger dopaminergic system. This is where dopamine is transmitted from the ventral tegmental area, known as the VTA, to other parts of the limbic system, like the amygdala, hippocampus, and nucleus accumbens. This pathway is essential to the integration of reward processing, motivation, and reinforcement learning. When we seek out these ways of gratitude, the release of dopamine resembles much of a feeling of reward and pleasure. This feeling is then enhanced by the nucleus accumbens and then retained by the hippocampus through memory processing. The dopaminergic response motivates the brain to pursue more of these positive experiences so that it can elicit that same feeling of gratitude in future experiences. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is a cognitive bias that causes people to notice something more after they have consciously sought it out. So how does this work? The reticular activating system, known as the RAS, is a network of neurons located in the brainstem and is largely responsible for wakefulness and attention. When we focus on more positive thoughts, we essentially sensitize our brain to more uplifting stimuli and positively valent emotions. We start to pay attention to more things that we can be grateful for, which we may have overlooked prior. The RAS can then aid in emotional regulation, sustaining our attention to these behaviors and the feelings and activities that support our well-being. This is where the idea of confirmation bias comes into play. The more you believe you will lead a positive life, the more willing you are to seek out situations and values that align with those behaviors. As practicing gratitude becomes a habit, it becomes easier to rewire your brain to seek out these positive thoughts. A big part of development is how we see and perceive the world. Though most of this comes from experience and expectation, we ultimately have the power to train our own brain. Part of positive psychology is also adopting an internal locus of control. This essentially means that a change in mindset comes from within. When we focus on the things that we can change and do not let external factors influence us negatively, it places significantly less stress on our bodies. Having an internal locus of control can also help develop a growth mindset because it allows us to recognize the responsibility that we have as individuals over our own actions and thoughts. Your successes and failures can either be a result of your own choices and effort, or they can be a result of other people's actions and mere luck. The difference is in perspective and introspection. By being open to new experiences and the challenges of learning, we can choose how we react to our circumstances, and this can help us change our mindset. So next time you find yourself feeling down, I encourage you to do your best to break that cycle of rumination and anxiety. Throw in, I have an attitude of gratitude at the situation, and take the necessary steps to ground yourself. You are more than what happens to you or how you cope with the circumstances you have been given. Remember that there is power in reacting with intention on your own accord. Although it is easier said than done, we ultimately have the power to think about our experiences and do our best to move forward from them. We don't need to allow the world or other people to define our emotions or our circumstances. For me, it started with a heartfelt conversation between me and my sister, and that completely changed my perspective. It can also change within you. Thank you.